In a world where belief and devotion should be paramount, these women shattered that foundation with unthinkable brutality. From Isabella Martinez's chilling betrayal to Buck's tragic act of violence, their stories will leave you questioning the darkest depths of human nature. These cases show chilling reactions of female killers who showed no remorse in court. Let's begin.
I don't need an attorney.
You don't need an attorney?
No.
Well, I beg to disagree with you. You have a right to represent yourself. In our Constitution, you have a right to represent yourself.
On July 6, 2017, a chilling 911 call was made from a home in Loganville, Georgia. When Gwinnett County Police arrived at the scene, they found a tragic sight: 5 lives lost. The victims included her husband, Martin Romero, 33, and their 4 children: Isabella, 10, Dakota, 7, Dylan, 4, and Axel, 2. A 5th child, Diana, 9, had also been stabbed but survived after undergoing emergency surgery. The Romero family had recently moved into a quiet neighborhood in Loganville, Georgia. By all accounts, they seemed like a happy and close-knit family. The children were often seen playing with friends and were described by neighbors as bright and full of potential. However, beneath this peaceful appearance, tragedy was brewing. Isabella Martinez, the mother, reportedly sank into a deep depression after the death of her father, which seemed to change everything. On July 16, 2017, the unimaginable happened. Isabel made a 911 call admitting she had stabbed her husband and children. When police arrived, they found 5 family members dead and another child, Diana, critically injured but alive. The shock didn't end there. During her first court appearance, Isabel behaved in ways that puzzled everyone. She smiled for the cameras, gave a double thumbs up, and even knelt in a prayer-like pose. Her actions baffled the court and viewers alike. The judge sternly told her to stop, but she shook her head and laughed. When asked about legal representation, Isabel refused an attorney, saying her faith and the people would defend her. It was a chilling display in a case that left a community heartbroken and searching for answers.
A Georgia prosecutor will not seek the death penalty for a woman charged with stabbing her husband and 4 children to death. 34-year-old Isabella Martinez pled not guilty to all charges in a Gwinnett County courthouse today.
The police quickly launched a thorough investigation after the devastating discovery in Loganville. They uncovered that Isabella Martinez had brutally stabbed her family in the early hours of the morning. Shockingly, she confessed to the crimes without hesitation. However, what happened in the courtroom left everyone even more baffled. During her sentencing, Isabel's behavior was nothing short of bizarre. She smiled, waved to the cameras, and even gave a double thumbs up.
Smiling the creepiest smile, gave the jury a thumbs up, and started moving as if she was praying.
She swayed in her seat, held her hands together in a prayer gesture, and appeared completely detached from the severity of the situation. Her strange reactions unsettled everyone present, including the judge, who had to warn her to stop performing for the cameras. Many people began to question what could have driven her to commit such a horrific act. Some experts speculated that Isabel might have been struggling with severe mental health issues, perhaps triggered by the recent loss of her father. Others were left wondering how such an unimaginable tragedy could happen in a seemingly normal, happy family.
I just went cold. I couldn't believe that what had happened. I mean, when they said that there had been a tragedy, I thought maybe a car accident or something.
After a thorough trial where she showed bizarre reactions to her act, Isabella Martinez was convicted of 5 counts of murder, aggravated assault, and child cruelty. She received a life sentence with the chance of parole plus 21 years.
To cut out the display for the cameras,
The loss devastated the community, leaving family, friends, and neighbors grappling with an unimaginable tragedy. The surviving child, Diana, faced a long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. For many, this case serves as a stark reminder of the hidden pain that can lead to unimaginable actions. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. Isabel's brutal attack on her family is impossible to forget. The next case shows the tragic loss of a daughter, leaving us questioning a mother's unimaginable actions.
Just be careful and watch out who you're talking to and watch out who's around you and be suspicious of everything.
On a cold November day in 2014, a tragedy unfolded in Nashua, New Hampshire that would leave a lasting impact on the community. Caitlin Marin, a 27-year-old mother, was convicted of killing her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage. The details of the case were so heart-wrenching that they would haunt everyone involved. Brielle Gage was a sweet, innocent little girl whose life ended far too soon. During Thanksgiving week in 2014, she suffered severe injuries that took her life, leaving her family and community devastated. At first, her mother, Caitlin Marin, claimed that Brielle had fallen down the stairs, but the truth was far more heartbreaking. Investigators soon uncovered a different story, revealing that Brielle had been subjected to unimaginable mistreatment. She had been kicked, punched, and even slammed against a wall. The injuries on her small body told a harrowing tale. Over 50 bruises and wounds showed just how much she had endured. Prosecutors explained that Marin's anger had spiraled out of control. They said she became enraged when Brielle had wet herself and later went to the kitchen at night to find food. What should have been simple moments of childhood became the trigger for a violent outburst.
You just can't keep the story straight. The only person afraid of the truth is her, Judge. And why? Because the truth is she's a killer.
Despite all the evidence, Marin insisted she was innocent. She chose to stand trial without a jury, putting her fate in the hands of a judge. The tragic loss of Brielle and the circumstances surrounding her death left the community in shock. During the trial, Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeff Strelzin painted a grim picture of Caitlin Marin, calling her a skilled and manipulative liar. He explained how Marin had carefully tried to cover her tracks, but the truth of what happened to her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage, could not be hidden. The courtroom was heavy with sorrow as the details of Brielle's slow and painful death were revealed. Prosecutors shared how the little girl suffered more than 50 injuries, leaving everyone in shock and disbelief. Among those present was Martin's mother, Kathleen Emery. She bravely spoke to the court, her voice filled with heartbreak and sorrow. Kathleen expressed her deep pain, not only for the loss of her beloved granddaughter, but also for her daughter, Caitlin. She mourned the reality that Caitlin would now spend the rest of her life behind bars, far from the life she once knew.
Mom says, no, Ma, don't touch her, don't talk to her. Her doctor said when she cries for no reason, you can't acknowledge her.
The tragedy of Brielle's death left a lasting impact on everyone. In December 2016, Marin was found guilty of second-degree murder. Judge Charles S. Temple sentenced her to 45 years to life in prison. He called Brielle's death horrific and expressed hope that her tragic story would serve as a wake-up call for society to better protect its children, while Marin showed no remorse.
I feel sorry. This is the rest of her life in prison.
Judge Temple called Brielle's death horrific.
And they say while she did talk to police before she was read her rights.
That's why when you get to the station, you don't tell her, you don't have to talk to me.
No.
And that's why you don't make any efforts to provide to her a phone to contact her attorney.
Brielle's death was a devastating reminder of how fragile and precious life is, especially for children. It sparked changes in child protection laws in New Hampshire, ensuring that Brielle's suffering would not be in vain. Though justice was served, the community will forever mourn the loss of a little girl whose life was stolen far too soon.
Pray for her family, for her siblings, because they have to live through it.
Caitlin's ruthless murder shocked the community. The next case shows an unspeakable cruelty that took us into a tragedy that took 2 young lives.
I just received a call from my child's mother that 2 of my youngest 2 dead babies, my sons, are dead in an apartment.
In 2017, a heartbreaking and horrific tragedy unfolded in Atlanta when Lamora Williams, a mother of 3, killed her 2 young sons, Jakarter and Keontae. The devastating incident shocked the community and left many struggling to comprehend how a mother could commit such an unspeakable act. Lamora Williams, a 24-year-old mother of 3, called emergency services in a state of panic, saying she had found her 2 young sons dead at home after leaving them with a caregiver. Lamora described a terrible scene to the 911 dispatcher, saying that the stove had fallen onto her youngest son's head, and her other son was found on the floor with what seemed to be severe injuries. She was frantic, asking for help and insisting that she didn't know what had happened. The situation seemed tragic, and the dispatcher could hear the desperation in her voice.
I'm so scared. I don't want to get locked up because I was at work.
Okay, ma'am.
I
understand that you're scared. I completely understand, but I need to get some help out there to you now.
As police arrived and began investigating, things started to look different. The details of the scene raised more questions. The officers found the children's bodies, and some marks seemed like burns. The investigation led to a shocking discovery. The 2 boys had been placed inside a tipped-over oven and left there for an extended period. This heartbreaking revelation changed everything, and the truth about what happened that tragic day began to emerge, leaving everyone in disbelief. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities began to uncover the heartbreaking truth about what had happened. The 2 young boys had died from severe burns, and the evidence suggested that their heads had been deliberately placed inside an oven that had been tipped over. The autopsy provided even more details, showing that the boys had been exposed to extreme heat for a long time before their tragic deaths. The burns they suffered were unlike any natural accident. All the evidence began to point towards Lamora Williams, the boys' mother. What had initially seemed like a tragic accident now looked like something far more sinister. The police and investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened, and the truth about the mother's involvement in such an unimaginable crime slowly became undeniable, leaving everyone stunned and deeply saddened by the outcome.
We know she was in the building somewhere in a back room, but she chose not to appear directly in front of the judge. So you're looking at video from a previous court hearing.
Lamora Williams was arrested and charged with the murders of her 2 sons. In 2024, she was convicted on 14 counts and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, in addition to an extra 35 years for other charges related to the case. Still, she shows no remorse for her actions. She chose to remain silent during the whole trial.
Of concealing a body and 1 charge of lying to police. Williams is accused of killing her 1-year-old and 2-year-old in October by putting them in a hot oven.
The case left the community in shock and sorrow, struggling to comprehend how a mother could carry out such an unimaginable crime against her children. The heartbreak was felt by all who followed the story, especially as Williams maintained her innocence, claiming mental health issues contributed to her actions.
And it's for them. And show them that we're there for him.
Lamora Williams' senseless violence shattered lives and left loved ones grappling with unimaginable loss. The next case shows how kindness can quickly turn into horror.
I am certain
de que siempre vivirá en nuestros corazones.
That she will always live in our heart.
This is the tragic story of Daniela Taveras, a 21-year-old woman whose life was abruptly cut short by an acquaintance she had just met. Daniela was killed in an unthinkable act of violence after a night out with friends from her gym, a night that was supposed to be full of fun and laughter. Daniela was a friendly, supportive member of a gym in Coral Springs, Florida. She was known for her kindness and easily made friends with everyone around her. One evening, during a gym outing, Daniela noticed that Yvonne Serrano, another gym member, had been drinking heavily. Serrano didn't seem to connect with the others, and Daniela, always the caring person, decided to offer her help. She offered to drive Serrano home after the night out. However, as the evening went on, Serrano's behavior became more intense and agitated. Her drunken state made everyone uncomfortable, and it became clear that she wasn't handling herself well. Despite the unsettling vibe, Daniela, trying to do the right thing, decided to drive Serrano home to make sure she was safe. But that decision would have devastating consequences. Hours later, police discovered Daniela's lifeless body in Serrano's driveway with a gunshot wound to her forehead. The investigation revealed the shocking truth, leaving everyone who knew Daniela in disbelief. What happened that night? What went so wrong?
Reduce the charges from second-degree murder, which would have carried a no-bond hold on it.
Prosecutors told the judge her soon-to-be ex-husband said when Serrano drinks, she blacks out.
The investigation into Daniela's death uncovered unsettling details. Yvonne Serrano, a woman with no criminal history, gave conflicting statements when questioned by the police. She first claimed that she didn't know how Daniela's body ended up in her driveway. Serrano told officers that she had found Daniela's car there when she was leaving for the gym, but her story began to change. As the investigation continued, Serrano admitted that she had been at the bar that night, drinking heavily. She told the police that she had blacked out, making her memory of the night fuzzy. Her story seemed inconsistent, and the authorities began to suspect her involvement. Further investigation revealed troubling evidence in Serrano's home. A gun was found, and there were signs that she had deleted footage from her Ring doorbell camera, which might have captured crucial moments. The discovery of this evidence raised more questions about Serrano's role in Daniela's tragic death. The inconsistencies in Serrano's statements, combined with the physical evidence, left investigators believing she had a part in what happened that fateful night. Daniela's family and friends were left searching for answers, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had stolen Daniela's life.
Or to give the suspect a ride home. She gave her a ride home. The vehicle pulls in the driveway, and at some point the suspect did shoot the victim and kill her.
Serrano was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with evidence. However, prosecutors later reduced the charges to manslaughter with a firearm, a lesser charge that carries a maximum 30-year sentence. Serrano pleaded not guilty, that she's not guilty of her act, leaving Daniela's family and friends devastated by the turn of events. Despite the change in charges, Daniela's mother, Isa, and those who knew Daniela continued to seek justice for her tragic death.
Good morning, Ms. Serrano. You're charged with 2 counts. The first is tampering or fabricating with physical evidence. The second is second-degree murder.
The story of Daniela Taveras' untimely death has left a deep emotional mark on her family and friends. Daniela's mother, Isa, finds herself grappling with anger and frustration, knowing that no matter what happens in court, her daughter will never return.
Ahorita
Estamos a la espera de la sentencia.
Isabel Taveras, the victim's mother, said she watched while a jury spent more than 2.5 days deliberating before arriving to the guilty verdict.
Yvonne's heinous case leaves everyone in shock and disbelief. The next case exposed shocking cruelty that caused irreversible damage.
Happen without her? Absolutely not. She's the way that they get into the apartment. She never would have opened the door for Michelle Lambert. She helps tackle her. She holds her down while Lambert's stabbing her to death.
In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a woman named Tabitha Buck was sentenced to life in prison for the 1991 murder of 16-year-old Lori Sho. Buck, just 17 years old at the time of the crime, along with her accomplice, Lisa Michelle Lambert, lured Sho's mother out of their apartment and brutally slashed Sho's throat. After nearly 28 years in prison, Tabitha Buck was recently released on parole, which has sparked a lot of debate and emotions. Tabitha Buck's story intertwines with Lori Sho's, which began as a typical tale of small-town life, but ended in an unthinkable tragedy. In the summer of 1991, Lori, a bright and kind teenager, briefly dated Lawrence Butch Youngkin. However, Lori later confided to her mother that Youngkin had harmed her. Their relationship ended, and Youngkin returned to Lisa Michelle Lambert, his pregnant ex-girlfriend. For Lambert, Lori became an obsession. Driven by jealousy, she began harassing Lori, showing up at her workplace and spreading rumors. Lambert's friend, Tabitha Buck, joined in the aggression. Buck physically attacked Lori multiple times, including a violent confrontation at a mall. Lambert's malice turned methodical. With Buck's help, she gathered information about Lori's schedule and obtained her phone number. On December 20th, 1991, Lori was brutally attacked at her home. Her mother, Hazel, had been lured away by a staged phone call. Lori sustained fatal injuries, but managed to identify Lambert as her killer before succumbing. Police arrested Lambert, Buck, and Youngkin that day. Lori's death remains a haunting reminder of how jealousy and hatred can spiral into violence. Tabitha Buck was granted parole after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that life sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. This ruling meant that her sentence was revisited, giving her a chance for release after serving nearly 28 years in prison. Some people believe that everyone deserves a second chance, especially those who were young when they committed their crimes. They feel that Tabitha's time in prison allowed her to change and learn from her mistakes. However, for the families affected by her actions, this decision is difficult to accept. The Sho family, in particular, is left facing old wounds as they remember the brutal crime that took Lori Sho's life.
But a very, very effective one, the odds of my client meeting a personality like that, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1.
Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman shared how painful it has been for victims' families, even though the court was just following the law. The decision raises a complex issue. Should someone who committed a serious crime as a juvenile be given a second chance? While the law sees potential for rehabilitation, the emotional weight for those who have suffered from the crime remains heavy. This situation leaves everyone questioning the balance between justice, healing, and the hope for redemption. Tabitha Buck's parole was granted after she showed good behavior during her time in prison, completed programs to improve herself, and took responsibility for the crime she committed. Despite these positive steps, she must follow strict rules now that she's out. She's not allowed to have contact with anyone who uses substances or with the family of the victim, Lori Sho. She must also attend regular mental health evaluations and, importantly, she can't go back or even visit Lancaster County, where the crime happened. Some people believe that this is a fair chance for Buck to rebuild her life, especially since she was so young when she committed the crime. However, others feel unsure about whether someone who took the life of another person, especially so brutally, should be allowed back into society. For the victim's family and others affected, it's hard to accept that someone who caused so much pain could now be free. It's a complex situation where the law offers a second chance, but it still leaves many with mixed emotions and questions about justice and forgiveness.
Tabitha Buck was 17 years old when she was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal killing of 16-year-old Lori Sho in Lancaster County.
Tabitha Buck is now a free woman, but her release doesn't erase the trauma caused by her actions all those years ago. While she serves her parole under strict conditions, the emotional scars for the Sho family and others affected by the case remain. This case highlights the complexity of juvenile justice and whether it's possible for someone to truly change after committing such a crime.
The surviving family members were told that the sentence was final, and in cases like this, that it was life without parole. And
Tabitha's journey ahead will not only be one of legal challenges, but emotional healing for all involved. The emotional reaction to Buck's release is mixed. For some, it brings hope that people can change, even after making terrible mistakes. For others, it feels like a reminder of the deep pain caused by the loss of a young life. The release of someone who committed such a violent crime against another person is difficult for many to accept. particularly for the victim's family, who are left to process the hurt once again. Next, we turn to the heartbreaking and disturbing case of Susan Smith, a mother who shocked the nation with her tragic actions and the devastating consequences that followed.
God gives us free choice, and she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do.
On October 25, 1994, Susan Smith called the police in Union, South Carolina, with a heart-wrenching claim. She said a man had carjacked her vehicle, taking her 2 young sons, 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alexander, with him. The world was captivated as Susan appeared on national TV, tearfully begging for her children's safe return. For 9 long days, the nation watched and waited, clinging to the hope that Susan Smith's 2 little boys, Michael and Alexander, would be found safe. Susan, their heartbroken mother, appeared on television, pleading tearfully for their return. Her sorrow seemed genuine, and the world rallied behind her. But behind the grief-stricken face lay a disturbing secret. From the very beginning, investigators sensed something wasn't right. They carefully analyzed Susan's story and found key inconsistencies. One glaring issue was her description of the supposed carjacking. Susan claimed she had been stopped at a red light in an empty intersection when a man forced her out of the car and drove off with her children. However, investigators quickly realized the traffic light wouldn't have turned red unless another vehicle had been present, something Susan never mentioned.
Susan Smith is convicted for their deaths and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
As the pressure mounted, Susan broke down and confessed. The heartbreaking truth emerged. She had driven her car to John D. Long Lake with her sons strapped in their car seats. She let the car roll into the water, drowning her children. Her shocking motive is that she wanted to start a new life with a wealthy man who didn't want kids. It was a revelation that shattered the nation. The discovery of Michael and Alexander's bodies in the lake left the nation heartbroken. For days, people had hoped the little boys would be found safe. But that hope was shattered when their lifeless bodies were recovered from the depths of John D. Long Lake. Susan Smith's car, submerged 122 feet from the shore, became a haunting symbol of the crime. When questioned, Susan claimed she had been overwhelmed by emotional pain and insisted she hadn't planned to harm her children. Her confession shocked everyone who had watched her tearful public pleas just days before. In 1995, Susan's trial gripped the nation. Her defense team described her as a deeply troubled woman battling severe depression, trying to explain how a mother could commit such a terrible act. They argued she wasn't thinking clearly and was overwhelmed by despair. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture. They claimed Susan's actions were calculated, motivated by her desire to pursue a relationship with a man who didn't want children. After hearing all the evidence, it took the jury just 2.5 hours to reach a verdict: guilty of 2 counts of murder.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children.
Though prosecutors sought the death penalty, the jury sentenced Susan to life in prison with the chance of parole after 30 years. She remains incarcerated at the Leith Correctional Institution, where her 2024 parole request was denied.
Has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander.
As the judge announced Susan's sentence, a profound sense of shame clouded her features. Her voice trembled as she spoke, acknowledging the horribleness of her actions. With a tear-streaked face, she admitted how deeply remorseful she felt for what she had done, especially to her children. Her hands clenched as if holding on to the remnants of the guilt that weighed her down.
And I love Michael and Alex with all my heart.
The case of Susan Smith is a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of a desperate mind. It's a story that still stirs deep sorrow and outrage, leaving a scar on the hearts of all who remember.
Now she wants a chance to be free after only serving 30 years. No. Life should mean life.
The Susan Smith case shook the nation's trust to its core, but the next case reveals a reckless action that forever changed lives. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description.
Or you're stone cold sober and you have a seizure every single day, and yet you still choose to get in a car and drive. I honestly don't know which one is worse.
On August 10th, 2017, a tragic crash occurred on the Leroy-Shellman Expressway in Tampa, Florida. That day, Louise and Rita Philippak, along with their 8-year-old daughter Georgia, lost their lives in an accident that shook the community. At the center of this devastation was 31-year-old Amber Pereira, whose actions would forever alter countless lives. On a tragic night, Amber Pereira was speeding down the road in her Kia, driving at an alarming 120 miles per hour. In a split second, she collided with the back of the Philippak family's Hyundai, sending their car spinning across the median into oncoming traffic. The car crashed into 2 other vehicles before bursting into flames. Sadly, the Philippak family, 3 members in total, lost their lives at the scene. Another driver was also injured in the chaos. Instead of stopping to offer help, Amber continued driving, not realizing the gravity of what had just happened. She drove for 2 more miles before her car broke down. When authorities caught up with her, they discovered that Amber's blood alcohol level was far above the legal limit, and there were also traces of cannabis in her system. This devastating accident took the lives of an entire family and left another person severely injured. The consequences of Amber's reckless actions would be felt by everyone who loved the Philippak family, and the community was left in shock over the preventable tragedy. It serves as a sobering reminder of how driving under the influence can lead to irreversible, heartbreaking consequences.
Moments ago, Amber Pereira found out how long she'll spend in prison for killing a family in a deadly crash.
During the investigation, Amber Pereira tried to explain the crash by claiming she had suffered a seizure just before the collision. However, the evidence told a different story. Data from her car's recorder revealed that she had made several attempts to steer and avoid the impact, suggesting she was fully aware of what was happening at the time. After the crash, Amber was taken to the hospital, but even there, she tried to hide blood samples in an attempt to avoid further legal trouble. Her actions only added to the growing mountain of evidence against her. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Amber's reckless driving, under the influence of alcohol and substances, had led to the tragic deaths of 3 innocent people and the serious injury of another. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Amber finally pleaded guilty to 9 charges, including 3 counts of DUI manslaughter and leaving the scene of a crash involving death. Her guilty plea marked the beginning of a long legal battle, but the consequences of her actions were already painfully clear. This tragedy serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating impact of impaired driving and the importance of being responsible behind the wheel.
The emotion got the best of Amber Pereira throughout the 3-hour hearing. At times, she dropped her head into her hands in despair.
On October 22, 2019, Circuit Judge Christopher Sabella sentenced Pereira to 50 years in prison. While her attorney argued for leniency, citing her minimal criminal history, the judge and the victim's family felt justice demanded a harsher sentence.
Sentenced the 31-year-old to 5 decades behind bars.
Your life is ruined, but you also ruined a lot of lives and ended 3 lives.
As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, a wave of emotion swept over Amber, her heart heavy with guilt. The weight of each sentence sank deep into her soul, and tears began to fall. Every word seemed to magnify her regret, the burden of her actions pressing down on her more than ever.
Moments ago, Amber Pereira found out how long she'll spend in prison for killing a family in a deadly crash.
This tragic story leaves a lasting impact, reminding us of the irreversible consequences of reckless decisions. For the Philippak family, no sentence could bring back their loved ones. For Pereira, her life is now a stark reflection of the cost of one fateful choice.
Not going to make it through the crash, and that my children were going to lose their mother.
Amber's reckless driving highlights how quickly tragedy can strike. But the next story takes manipulation and betrayal to an even darker level.
Because of a prison writing group saying that deflecting blame was a coping mechanism.
On May 1st, 1990, Pamela Smart returned to her New Hampshire home to find her condo ransacked and her husband, Gregory Smart, brutally murdered. To everyone around her, Pamela appeared to be a grieving widow, shocked by the apparent burglary gone wrong. However, the police soon unraveled a chilling truth hidden behind her composed exterior. At the age of 22, Pamela found herself in a complicated relationship with a much younger Billy Flynn, who was only 15 years old. Billy, feeling deeply connected to Pamela, was manipulated by her into doing something he never imagined. Pamela, in a bid to end her unhappy marriage, convinced Billy that her love depended on him taking drastic action. She told him she would withhold affection unless he helped her remove her husband, Gregory, from the picture. Billy, overwhelmed by his emotions, turned to his 3 friends for assistance. Together, they hatched a plan, and one fateful night, Billy shot Gregory while one of his friends, Randall, held him down. The scene initially appeared as though a robbery had gone wrong, but as detectives pieced together the details, they started to see a different story. A breakthrough came when Pamela's co-worker, Cecilia Pierce, stepped in to help. Wearing a wire, Cecilia recorded Pamela's own words, which revealed the truth behind the crime. This critical evidence helped investigators uncover the shocking truth and brought Pamela's manipulation to light, leading to her eventual arrest.
Well,
We went upstairs, Pete and I, and right into Pam's room. We started dumping out the drawers and everything, so it would look like a burglary.
Pamela's trial grabbed the attention of the entire nation because it was one of the first in U.S. history to allow cameras in the courtroom. The prosecutors argued that Pamela was a manipulative person who used her charm to control a vulnerable teenager, Billy Flynn. They claimed she wanted to avoid a messy divorce and take advantage of her husband's $140,000 life insurance policy. Pamela's defense team argued that she didn't know about the murder plot and had no part in it. However, the recordings made by her co-worker, Cecilia, and the testimonies from Billy and his friends told a different story. These pieces of evidence showed that Pamela had played a big role in planning the crime. After a trial that lasted 14 days, the jury found Pamela guilty of being an accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with no chance of ever being released. Pamela's case became a cautionary tale about manipulation and the dangerous consequences of taking advantage of others.
Is that Cecilia Pierce and Bill Flynn are having all these conversations about the murder of your husband, which you know absolutely nothing about. Is that it?
Yes, they testified to that also.
To this day, Pamela maintains her innocence, claiming she never wanted her husband dead. However, her life behind bars has been tumultuous. From enduring a violent assault by fellow inmates to being the subject of media documentaries, Pamela remains a controversial figure. In March 2023, her last appeal for a sentence reduction was denied, sealing her fate to live out her days in prison. During the whole trial, Pamela showed no remorse for her act.
Who is from New Hampshire is serving a life sentence without parole for plotting with a 15-year-old to kill her husband back in 1990. William Flynn served a 25-year sentence for the shooting death.
Was killing your husband one of those mistakes?
No, it wasn't.
Acknowledge for the first time in my own, mind and my own heart how responsible I was.
Along with it, Billy also gets emotional and says sorry to Gregory's family for what he did. The story of Pamela Smart left many in shock and disbelief.
I felt a tremendous amount of shame.
The case serves as a grim reminder of the devastating consequences of manipulation, betrayal, and blind infatuation. While Gregory's life was tragically cut short, the ripple effects of his crime continue to haunt everyone involved. Pamela Smart's cunning manipulation left lives in ruins, but the next case unveils a chilling story of betrayal that cuts even deeper.
You've caused untold damage to our lives, yours, and others.
On November 14, 2020, the quiet town of Casco Township in Allegan County was rocked by a horrifying discovery. A charred vehicle, near which lay the burned remains of 25-year-old David Silverlight, was found. What initially seemed like a tragic accident quickly turned into a murder investigation that unveiled dark secrets and a deadly conspiracy. David Silverlight, a resident of the South Haven area, had once been in a relationship with Allison Martin. Although their romantic relationship had ended, Allison's connection to David remained in unexpected ways. When David's body was discovered, burned and abandoned, police quickly suspected something was wrong. It didn't seem like an accident, and they soon began looking into the people who were closest to him. As the investigation unfolded, authorities began to suspect Allison and her friend Justin Terpstra were involved. The two were eventually linked to the crime, and it became clear that something far darker had taken place. Allison, at 23 years old, and Justin, at 25, were both arrested and charged with open murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The charges they faced were serious, as they carried the chance of life in prison. The community was shocked by the crime, and the case would later be a reminder of how even familiar relationships can sometimes take a dangerous turn. Investigators continued their work to understand the full story behind David's tragic death. The investigation into David Silverlight's death uncovered some truly unsettling details. Just 4 days after his body was found, it was confirmed that David had been murdered. It turned out that Allison Martin and her friend Justin Terpstra had made a deadly plan together. They decided to kill David and try to hide the evidence by burning his body along with his car. The news of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving many in disbelief that something so tragic could happen so close to home. David's family was heartbroken, struggling to understand why anyone would harm him. As the case moved forward, it became even more difficult to process. During the preliminary hearings, Allison was evaluated and found to be mentally fit to stand trial. This development added even more weight to the case, as it became clear that the crime had been carefully planned and carried out. The community, along with David's loved ones, hoped for justice as they watched the case unfold. The shocking events served as a reminder of how quickly relationships can turn dark, and how important it is to stay vigilant about the people we trust.
The life sentence without parole was prescribed by law, so today's hearing is mostly a chance for Brandon Silverlight's family to vent their anger on the woman they say.
Allison's preliminary hearing concluded that there was enough evidence to move the case to trial. Although Justin's hearing was delayed due to competency evaluations, both defendants would eventually face the full extent of the law for their heinous crime. At the time of the hearing, Allison gets emotional and starts crying. This case is a haunting reminder of how relationships, when marred by conflict and malice, can take a dark turn. David's tragic death left a void in his loved ones' lives, while the community of Casco Township was left grappling with the horror of what had unfolded in their midst. Justice for David now lies in the hands of the courts, but the emotional scars left behind will take far longer to heal.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy, really friendly, outgoing. He was really into playing drums. I believe he played with the University of Western Michigan marching band. He also taught marching percussion to high school students, and that was really one of his passions.
These cases highlight the terrifying and heartbreaking actions of individuals who, despite their horrific crimes, showed no remorse in court. From chilling smiles to bizarre behavior, their courtroom reactions left the world in disbelief. In the next video, we continue to explore more shocking cases and the sentences that shook the justice system. Don't miss out. Keep watching.